Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm a real estate lawyer. It's a job that needs patience, attention to detail, and a thick skin when dealing with town bureaucracy. The cases I handle aren't usually exciting, mostly helping clients navigate permits, zoning laws, and local regulations. But sometimes these mundane interactions lead to surprising connections later. About 2 years ago, I took on a client who wanted to develop a property in a neighboring town. Let's call it Oak Ridge. My client had bought land there with plans to build something that didn't fit the current zoning designation. He needed either a rezoning approval or a variance from the town board to proceed with his development. From my research, I could tell some people on the Oak Ridge Town Board weren't keen on this type of development. It didn't match their vision for the community. Still, my client had the right to apply, and I planned to help him through the process. I emailed the Oak Ridge Planning Department asking for a pre-application meeting. This helps both sides understand what's possible before submitting formal paperwork. Their first response was dismissive. They said the proposed development didn't fit with their current zoning ordinances. This wasn't helpful. The whole point of asking for a meeting was to discuss options like rezoning or variances. I explained this in a second email saying we understood the current zoning but wanted to explore legal pathways forward. No response. After waiting a week, I sent a third email. Instead of a reply, I got an automated message saying my email had been blocked by their system. I was stunned. I'd never had a town office block communication about a legitimate application. I called the planning office and told the receptionist that I was calling about a pre-application meeting request for a property on Maple Road. I mentioned I had sent several emails but was having technical difficulties. The receptionist transferred me to the planning department. When I reached someone in the planning department, I explained my situation about trying to schedule a pre-application meeting for my client's property and that my emails weren't getting through. The person said they had reviewed our proposal and determined it didn't fit their zoning ordinances. I tried to explain that I understood that, but we wanted to discuss options for rezoning or variance applications, which was the purpose of a pre-application meeting. The planning department person told me they weren't interested in that type of development in Oak Ridge and suggested looking at other towns. When I pointed out that my client had the right to at least apply and have his case heard by the board, they said we could submit an application but shouldn't get our hopes up. Left with no alternative, we submitted a formal application without the benefit of a pre-application meeting. As expected, it was denied with a vague explanation that gave little substance for an appeal. The denial letter said the application was denied as inconsistent with town development goals. I prepared to file an appeal and start the variance process, but my client was done. After spending thousands on the property and initial application fees, he decided the town was too hostile to work with. I told my client I thought we had grounds for an appeal since the denial didn't specify which ordinances we were violating. My client said he was done fighting this battle. He felt these people had made it clear they didn't want his business. I said I understood but reminded him we had 30 days to file an appeal if he changed his mind. He said he was cutting his losses and asked how much of his retainer was left. I had to refund a big portion of his unused retainer, which isn't great for a lawyer's income, but my agreement required it. The case was closed and I moved on to other clients. Fast forward about 2.5 years. I serve on my town's planning board as a volunteer, reviewing applications and interviewing candidates for town positions. During one meeting, a familiar name appeared on the applicant list for our town's planning director position. The applicant walked in unaware of who I was. He had never met me in person and my name on the board probably didn't register with him. His presentation was polished, highlighting his experience in town planning. But I noticed some gaps in his employment history that suggested he had moved between jobs frequently. When it came time for questions, I decided to probe his approach to public engagement. I asked how he handled pre-application inquiries from property owners or their representatives. He gave a polished answer about believing in an open-door policy. He claimed to love meeting with property owners and always making time to explain rules and procedures. He said communication was key in this role. I dug deeper, asking about situations where a proposed development might not align with current zoning and how he would handle those pre-application discussions. Again, he had a perfect answer ready. He said that was even more reason to meet early, and that he'd explain the challenges but also discuss potential paths forward, whether through rezoning, variances, or modifying the proposal. I continued with more specific questions. I posed a scenario about a lawyer contacting him 3 times, requesting a pre-application meeting for a client whose development might require a variance. I asked how he would respond. He said he would schedule that meeting, claiming it was better to have those discussions early and explore all options before a formal application. I pressed further, asking if he would do this even if the town board might not be favorable to the development. He doubled down, saying especially then. He claimed it wasn't his job to prejudge applications or block citizens from applying, but rather to facilitate the process fairly. Then I got very specific, asking what if this lawyer's emails about a property on Maple Road in Oak Ridge were being blocked after requesting a meeting. That's when I saw it. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. The confident smile faltered for a second as he realized who I was and what I was referring to. He stumbled through a response, saying that would be inappropriate and that every applicant deserves fair consideration and communication. I said I agreed completely. After the interviews ended, the board discussed all candidates thoroughly. I shared my experience with this applicant, not as a personal vendetta, but as relevant information about his professional conduct and honesty. In the end, we hired another candidate who showed more consistency and transparency. She had slightly less diverse experience, but hadn't job hopped as frequently and had shown good performance on recent projects. I didn't expect my trip to my aunt in Texas would include watching one of the most entitled people I've ever seen get what they deserved. I'm close with this aunt. She's the fun one, creative, funny, with the best stories. When I visited her last year, before the pandemic, we went shopping at what I'll call World of Walls. It rhymes with that. We were having a good time browsing through the store, catching up. My aunt told me about her husband's woodworking project, a custom entertainment center, and showed me pictures of the blanket she was making for her new grandbaby with an elephant pattern. While looking at decorative candles, we heard a voice getting louder and ruder. At first, we tried to ignore it, but then there was a sharp shout. The woman yelled for someone to get out of her way. When nobody answered, she shouted again, repeating that whoever was in her path needed to move. My aunt and I looked at each other. Being curious, we decided to see what was happening. We went around the corner and saw the source of the noise. There she was, pure entitlement. She had that bobbed haircut, yoga pants too small, and a tight shirt that said, "I'm trying to look 25 though I'm over 40. She was overweight, which made the small clothing worse. The woman was yelling at an older man who was looking at items on a shelf. He wasn't in a hurry and wasn't going to rush because this woman was impatient. The older man looked at her with a cold stare. He didn't speak, just gave her a hard look before turning back to what he was doing, ignoring her. The woman turned to another shopper nearby. She complained about hating Texas, saying everyone there was rude and ignorant. The shopper barely noticed her, just saying she should go back home if she felt that way, then walked away. What we didn't know then was that this woman had been walking around the store for a while, bragging about how much better California was and calling Texas full of bumpkins and rednecks. After hearing her insult his state, the older man turned to her. He made a rude comment about Californicators not being welcome and how Texans hated them. The woman's face changed to a shocked expression. Then, I still can't believe it, she slapped him across the face. Without pause, the older man slapped her back, hard enough that she spun and almost hit the nearest shelves. He asked if she wanted to try that again. The woman screamed about being attacked and threatened to have him arrested. She seemed ready to slap him again. The older man held up his hand as a warning. She still tried to slap him again. This time he slapped her back so hard that she fell on her butt with a loud sound. By now, a manager and security guard had arrived. just in time to see her second attempt to slap him and his response. They helped the woman up and she started crying and making up a story, claiming the man had attacked her while she was shopping. The older man explained what happened. He said she had been disruptive, insulting Texas residents, and had slapped him first. He told them to check the security cameras if they didn't believe him. The woman kept adding more details to her story that made no sense. She now accused him of threatening sexual assault and other claims. Nobody around her believed her. Some people were scoffing at her. The store manager tried to calm the woman down. She refused, demanding police be called to arrest her attacker. The security guard spoke into his radio, and about 10 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. The manager had already watched the security footage. When the officers told her she was being arrested for assault, she lost control. She kicked and screamed as they tried to handcuff her. She kicked over displays, destroyed a shelf, and spat on an officer. They got her under control and took her out of the store, adding charges of assaulting an officer and destruction of property. After things quieted down, we learned the older man wasn't charged. He was a former Texas Ranger, not the baseball team, but the law enforcement agency. He knew how to handle himself and stayed within his rights to self-defense. My aunt and I finished shopping in shock and amusement. That shopping trip gave us something to talk about for years. When I visit Texas now, my aunt asks if I want to go to World of Walls to find another Karen in the wild. I work as a cake decorator at the local grocery store. It's a fun job where I get to be creative, and our store has the best cakes in town. I rarely get complaints about my work, especially my personalization. After working in customer service for years, I don't have patience for rude customers. I'll help anyone who's nice, but when someone gets nasty, my patience disappears. Our town is growing, bringing in new people who don't know me or my work. That's how I met the most entitled customer I've dealt with in a long time. I was making display cakes when a guy came to my counter. He picked a cake and asked me to write a message on it. I wrote his message in my cursive style. No one has ever complained about my handwriting before. I put the cake on the counter and went back to work. A few minutes later, he came back with the cake. I asked if there was a problem. He said no one could read what it said. He said it looked bad and wanted me to rewrite it. I tried telling him I would need to scrape the top, which would damage the icing, but he cut me off. He said he didn't want this cake and would pick another. I kept professional and asked which cake he wanted instead. He pointed to another cake, and I took it from the case. I planned to use a clear print style since he didn't like my cursive. But before I could start, he told me to get someone who could spell. My patience was gone. I hadn't misspelled anything. He just didn't like my handwriting. I told him to go to the front desk and ask for our assistant store leader. He walked away. Soon our front-end manager came to help him instead. She is not a decorator, but can write on cakes when needed. She's slower than me, which seemed fair since he was rude. I told her why I wasn't helping him anymore. She took over and wrote his message while he waited. He took his cake and left. 10 minutes later, the front-end manager came back looking embarrassed. The customer returned because she had misspelled a word on the cake. He rejected my perfect spelling because of my handwriting, only to get a cake with an actual mistake. We tried fixing it by scraping off the wrong word, but this damaged the icing. The mark couldn't be hidden without redoing the whole top. When he saw the cake, he said it was ruined. Our assistant store leader came to see what was happening. I explained everything and she tried to fix the cake too. She soon realized it wouldn't look good without redoing the entire top. She told him his options. Take the blemished cake with correct spelling or pick another cake. She didn't offer a discount since he created the problem by rejecting my work and not letting me fix it. The customer took a third cake with no writing and left the store. Nobody got in trouble because everyone saw he was being unreasonable. I fixed the 2 rejected cakes and put them back in the case. He spent 20 minutes trying to bully us into meeting his impossible standards, but left with just a plain cake. I found out later he complained to our store manager, who likes my decorating. Nothing came of his complaint, and I still decorate cakes with my cursive style. I've been in construction for almost 15 years now, and I've seen all kinds of people come and go on job sites. But this one guy, He takes the cake for being the most entitled, lazy boss I've ever had to deal with. Last year, I was assigned to a pretty big project funded by the county government. Good pay, steady work, exactly what I needed after a few months of slow business. The county had appointed their own site manager to oversee operations and make sure everything went according to plan. Let's just call him Mr. Manager. From day one, I noticed something was off about Mr. Manager. He wasn't completely incompetent. He knew the basics of construction, but my God, was he lazy. He was supposed to be on site daily, checking our progress and making sure we followed county specifications. Instead, he'd show up maybe once or twice a week, spending most of his time who knows where. He assigned this young kid as his proxy, basically a yes man who had no real authority but would relay messages back and forth. The poor kid couldn't have been more than 22, fresh out of some technical program with zero real-world experience. I also noticed Mr. Manager running side projects using county equipment and materials. He'd take concrete mixers, lumber, and tools to work on what looked like private jobs. I kept my mouth shut though, not my circus, not my monkeys, right? That changed about 2 months into the project. I was reviewing the plans for the next phase when I noticed a huge error with the survey markers. The measurements were off by several meters, which meant we would end up building partially on the neighboring property. I called Mr. Manager right away. I explained the problem with the survey markers for the next units, telling him they were way off and that we needed to have the survey crew come back. Mr. Manager told me to just do it anyway and claimed I didn't know what I was talking about. When I tried to explain that building according to these markers would put us on someone else's property, he yelled that he was the site manager and ordered me to follow his instructions before hanging up on me. After taking a deep breath and considering the situation, I told everyone to pack up because we were done for the day. The next day, Mr. Manager finally showed his face on site around 11 a.m., completely furious. He got right in my face and asked who I thought I was, sending everyone home and costing them a whole day of work. I stayed calm and said I would happily build on the neighbor's property if that's what he wanted, but when they sued the county, I would make sure they knew exactly who gave that order. His face turned red as he walked off to check the survey markers himself. 20 minutes later, he slunk back, avoiding eye contact with anyone. He quietly told his proxy to tell everyone to go home until the survey crew returns. From that point on, Mr. Manager had it out for me. He'd nitpick everything I did, looking for any excuse to write me up or get me fired. It was like I'd become his personal enemy just for preventing a massive legal headache. Things came to a head when we were pouring the foundation walls. Mr. Manager actually showed up that day, walking around with his clipboard, pretending to inspect everything. I asked him if he had checked that the walls were plumb. He told me to mind my own business and said he knew what he was doing, declaring everything was good to go. The next morning I arrived early and did a quick check myself. I held a level against one section of wall and couldn't believe what I was seeing. The wall was leaning inward at the top by about 15 centimeters, way beyond acceptable tolerance. When I was standing there with the level, Mr. Manager pulled up in his truck. When he saw the leaning wall, he immediately started blaming me, shouting that I had built everything wrong and that it was completely my fault. He called me all sorts of names, incompetent, idiot, worthless in front of my crew and the concrete truck drivers waiting for our next pour. Something in me snapped. I told him about his laziness and incompetence, reminding him that he had approved the work yesterday and had claimed everything was good to go. I asked where he was when we needed actual supervision and said he was off doing side jobs with county equipment. The color drained from his face. He said something about needing to make some calls and disappeared for the rest of the day. The next day, Mr. Manager returned with his solution. He said the leaning wall wasn't a big deal at all, and he could easily fix it with some additional concrete bracing. Against my advice, he insisted on directing the pour himself. What a disaster! His botched attempt failed, spilling half a truck worth of concrete down the excavation. Thousands of dollars of material wasted, not to mention the cleanup costs. I'd had enough and told him to get out and stay out of our way. When he tried to assert his authority, I turned to the crew and told them that from now on, we would do things my way, and they shouldn't take orders from him anymore. The crew, having seen Mr. Manager's incompetence firsthand, nodded in agreement. We completed the third pour perfectly, and I took extra time to inspect all the previous work. That's when I found the source of the leaning wall, a simple support beam that Mr. Manager and his proxy had installed incorrectly, causing the form to shift during the pour. After that confrontation, Mr. Manager became a ghost. He'd show up maybe once a week, spend an hour hiding in his truck filling out paperwork, then leave. Which was fine by me. I documented every absence. After a month of this, I set up a meeting with the county project manager. I came prepared with photos, documentation, and some questions. I asked how much material the county had paid for the side projects Mr. Manager had been doing, showing photos as evidence. The county project manager asked what side projects I was referring to. I then asked if Mr. Manager had told them that one foundation wall was 15 centimeters off and needed to be poured 2 additional times. The project manager said Mr. Manager hadn't mentioned that at all. Finally, I asked if it was normal for a site manager to work from home 75% of the time, explaining that I had documented his attendance and he was barely on site. Mr. Manager's contract was not renewed. The project was completed under a new site manager who actually knew what they were doing and showed up every day. About a year later, my wife has been managing a busy employment agency for several years. One day, she texted me that I wouldn't believe who had just walked in with a resume. Mr. Manager had applied for a construction supervisor position through my wife's agency. His resume was embellished, claiming he had successfully completed the county project with excellent efficiency and under budget. My wife had her employee set up a meeting with him about a great job opportunity. When he arrived for the meeting, my wife told him that the position was working for her husband, me, whom he might recognize from the county project. He turned white as a sheet, said something about a scheduling conflict, and ran out of the office. Screw you, Mr. Manager. The construction world is smaller than you think. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.